update. So first of all, we got a new system software update released for the PS5, bringing the latest firmware up to 13.20. And all that's been stated here is that they've added more emojis that you can use for message reactions, and also that they've improved the messages and usability on some screens, although sometimes they do hide system security updates that they do not mention in the update notes. So you never know, something could have got patched. So always stay on as low a firmware as possible and do not update if you want to be able to jailbreak your PS5. Interestingly though, we have not had a equivalent update for the PS4. So the PS4 remains 13.50 as the latest firmware for now, although that could change. So this does not seem to have patched the 0-day kernel exploit that was announced by GejiNe, which affects supposedly the PS4 and PS5. Because if this did patch it, it would likely be an update that releases for both the PS4 and the PS5 around the same time. Now, from recent information, it does appear that GejiNe has actually reported that 0-day kernel exploit to PlayStation, because there have been a few messages from GejiNe that have been circulating online, including this one where GejiNe says there is some drama about the report that I want to talk about, but I will talk about this later after I get the bounty. But it does appear to have been reported to Sony via the HackerOne program, and it appears that GejiNe is having some kind of communication issues with the people over at either HackerOne or Sony about them not understanding the severity of the report or something along those lines. So yeah, it definitely appears to have been reported, so we'll just have to wait to see if disclosure is eventually requested and then it gets released a few months down the line. But of course, GejiNe has stated that there's no plans to release this particular exploit. But you never know. Another thing that could happen is that once this kernel exploit does eventually get patched, then we could potentially see other developers with kernel dumps comparing the kernel dumps to see if they can figure out what has been patched, which might lead them into being able to figure out what the kernel exploit is themselves without it having to be fully released. So there's always a chance that we could still eventually get access to this exploit. But moving on from that, the main thing I wanted to cover in this video is that it seems that digital edition games that can be used as userland exploits are kind of off the table now due to a change that PlayStation has made to the licenses when you buy any digital games. Now this seems to be another way that they're cracking down on different userland exploits. First of all, they got rid of the Netflix application and YouTube application that could be used as userland exploits on the PS5 by effectively forcing a license requirement on the account to be able to load those applications, whereas previously they did not require one. And then of course we also have the PlayStation View application that used to be able to be used as an entry point to trigger a kernel exploit, and they've now revoked the license on firmware 13.50, preventing the application from being loaded on that firmware. So any firmwares 13.50 and higher are not able to run PlayStation View and use that entry point. But we've always had the games that have userland exploits like Star Wars Racer Revenge, games like Don't Starve Together, and of course also Arcade Spirits, the new challengers, and the Japanese Lua games that can all be used as entry points to trigger any future kernel exploits. And so far there's not been anything they can do about that because they can't exactly just take away people's games. However, now whenever you buy any game from the PlayStation Store, so a couple of games I bought recently, we've got Don't Starve Together Console Edition. You can see here it now has this valid period start and end. So the start period is blank, but the end period is 14/5/2026. So I bought this game on the 14th of April, and then 1 month later it expires. It's no longer valid. You can see it also shows remaining time 20 days. And this used to just be a thing on PlayStation Plus games that would expire, like game rentals or subscriptions that would expire after a certain period. But this is happening with fully purchased games now. So games that you have fully purchased, they will now expire after 30 days at the time of either purchasing it or first downloading it. So that is the big issue there. You can see I have the same problem with Star Wars Racer Revenge. Same thing, got a start and end date, so expires in 29 days. I checked with other games that don't have known exploits. So I bought this one and it also expires. So it seems to be every game that you buy from now on. Interestingly, they don't appear to be applying this retroactively to games that you've previously purchased, because a couple of games here that I purchased on the store over 10 years ago, they do not have the 30-day expiry date. So they continue to work indefinitely. However, any new games that I purchase will expire within 30 days. So what this basically means is we can no longer rely on digital edition games. And yes, this applies to PS5 as well, even though I'm showing PS4 here. It's the same thing on the PS5 as far as I'm aware. So generally, we cannot rely on these digital games being used as entry points to trigger kernel exploits, because once you put your console offline for over 30 days, it will then require a connection to PSN to allow you to run that game. And this applies even if you do have your console activated as primary. So you can see here, expires in 29 days. And if I go into my account management, activate as your primary PS4, you can see it is already activated as my primary console. So even with your account being activated on the console, it will still expire within 30 days. This could also patch the unlimited game sharing method that repair shops were using to essentially use the revert method to activate an account that has lots of games licensed to it that were being downloaded onto customers' PS4s, and with the revert method they were able to keep the console activated while allowing the account to be activated on other consoles, so that they could basically preload hundreds of games onto different customers' consoles, as many as they wanted from the same account, and as long as they kept their console offline, they would be able to access those games. However, now that they expire within 30 days, that likely will no longer work unless there is some other workaround for that issue. Now, I do find this a little bit ironic, given the fact that this seems kind of similar to the same thing that PlayStation used to mock Xbox for back in the launch of the PlayStation 4, when Xbox was originally planning to have this, heavy DRM system where the console would have to check the license with the server within 24 hours, otherwise the game would not work. And that was originally what the Xbox One was going to have implemented. And Sony basically mocked them in their PlayStation 4 announcement, saying this:
if you enjoy playing single-player games offline, PS4 won't require you to check in online periodically.
Now, to be fair, they were referring to disc-based games in that particular clip. However, that has been the same also for digital games. As long as your account was activated as the primary account for the console, you could use the game indefinitely without having to periodically check in online. Whereas now they seem to be doing the same thing that they used to mock Xbox for planning to do, which is now you have to periodically check in online every 30 days to validate your digital purchases to be able to continue to use them offline. So yeah, that is obviously very disappointing to see, even from a game preservation standpoint as well, given the fact that you don't really own your digital purchases if you have to check in online with Sony to be allowed to use them. But anyway, that's a whole different issue. So obviously the recommendation is to keep your console offline. Do not connect to Sony servers if you do have one of these games that you're keeping potentially for a jailbreak that was a digital purchase. Make sure you keep the console offline, because even though it doesn't look like they're retroactively imposing this 30-day check-in period with games that you've bought before they introduced this change, just to be safe, I would still recommend just staying offline and not connecting to the server so you can continue to use your digital game. And of course, physical media is still king. So if you are able to get a disc edition version of one of the games, that would definitely be preferred, because you do not have these restrictions when you have a physical copy, and you can install them on older firmware consoles. And obviously you will need a disc edition console for this. So going forward, if you're looking to get a console that will be jailbreakable, then always go for a disc edition console, because it gives you more options. Now, it isn't all bad news, of course, because we do have Linux progressing for the PS5 from the Flow, as he has recently recruited a bunch of beta testers to test out Linux. He also states that he'll be releasing it with support up to 4.51, and then other people can try and port it to work with KLD load. So there's a chance that it could still work on higher firmwares through KLD load instead of a hypervisor exploit, but at least the immediate version seems like it will support up to 4.51. Also, the hypervisor exploit with PS5HEN is getting updates continuously to improve it. OSM discovered a problem with PS5HEN that was causing it to take much longer to load your fake package files, so that issue will be resolved in the next version. And also, Zeko has added it to his host, and it can now be loaded directly from zekoxeo.github.io/luasauce. So if you head to that website, you'll be able to load PS5HEN directly from the website instead of having to inject it with SOCAT, which makes it a lot more convenient. But it does still have some issues. Apparently, if you run lots of fake packages back to back, it can still cause crashes. I still wouldn't say it's quite ready for end users to use primarily yet. And then last but not least, we have Lappy releasing a new version of PS5 Xplorer, version 1.05. So this particular version here adds a few new features. I believe it also is a lot faster at transferring files. So if you're trying to copy games from, you know, one location to another, like your USB to your internal storage. It should copy the files a lot faster now. And there's also a new auto load editor built in, and this is my favorite feature by far, where you can select your autoload.txt file for your YouTube jailbreak or any other jailbreaks that use this system for loading payloads. You can edit your autoload.txt file, and then it has its own built-in editor where you can change the load order of what payloads get loaded first, and then also add and remove different payloads and add custom delays between payloads loading. So all of that now built into the latest version of PS5 Xplorer. Now, the update might not be out just yet at the time I'm recording this video, but if it's not out yet, it should be coming soon. So keep an eye on the Homebrew store for when 1.05 drops. So anyway, that's going to do it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And as always, I will hopefully see